Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder here at Boomer Consulting, and with me today is Arianna Campbell. Hi, Arianna.
Hey, John.
Thanks for joining us. Arianna is a shareholder and consultant as well here at Boomer Consulting, and she specializes in process improvement among leadership and some other items as well. But our topic today is around moving beyond efficiency to leveraging capacity. Now, Arianna, I know you work a ton every week with firms on helping them become more efficient. And you've been doing that for many years, but you've also been getting them to think about what to do with that capacity that they're going to be gaining. And sometimes maybe even think about that first so they know the direction they're heading. So why is it important from your perspective, Arianna, that firms really seek to move beyond efficiency to truly leveraging their capacity?
Well, the efficiency piece of the puzzle is important, and it always will be because it's the foundation of how can we essentially look at ways to streamline our processes and the way that we're doing things, and to remove the things that aren't adding value, to really focus on building in consistency, building up ultimately, the efficiency, and all of those things are important, but efficiency is really just a milestone. It's not the end game, because you run the risk if you're just focused on the efficiency of really missing the opportunity when it comes to what you do with the results of those efficiency gains. So when we're working with firms now, we actually start with the question and really want to get a good understanding of what would you do with the efficiency and ultimately the capacity. Think about it as time, money, resources. What would you do with the capacity that you create? Because if you don't have a plan for it, you're going to either just keep doing more of the same, or those efficiencies and that capacity is just going to slip through your fingers like sand. And we don't want that to happen. We really want firms to help firms use that capacity to really meet their goals.
Well, I think this is really where firms are wanting to end up, right? They may not be able to articulate it as well as you just did, but ultimately, I think every firm wants to become more efficient, gain capacity so they can spend time on maybe higher value clients, attracting, ideal target clients. Yeah, and there's obviously the desire to be more profitable and things of that sort. So I think you're spot on with your approach here, Ariana. Speak to me about some of the solutions you have for firms in this area. How do you recommend they approach this?
Well, it really starts first with a mindset change. Kind of just a summary of what I mentioned in my previous comments is really thinking about and giving some thoughtful consideration to the question of thinking beyond how can we be more efficient to what are we going to do with the efficiencies we create. Because if you just start with the mindset of we're just looking to be more efficient, you're going to miss opportunities. You need to start from the very beginning with asking yourself, asking your team, making sure that there's buy-in at the leadership level of what are we going to do with the efficiencies, with the capacity that we create. And in doing that, there's going to be benefits. Think about the buy-in increases that you can see on the front end when people are engaged with what can be as a result of this, instead of just focusing on upticks in efficiency, maybe seeing some gains in realization or something like that. When you can really get people fully engaged with the bigger opportunity, they're going to be inherently more bought in. And then also think about the fact that if we're focusing on what we're going to do beyond efficiency, that's also going to help us to move further faster because we actually know where we're going and what we're doing, right? So it helps us to create that path and get further faster. I think it also really helps for firms to see when we're thinking about results, sustained success. Because again, we're working towards meeting specific goals. We are looking towards really having a good idea of what our efficiencies, what our capacity gains are, so that we can continue to build on those to meet our goals. So really having that sustained success. And then another, benefit or solution that a firm can expect is to be able to serve their clients better. This is ultimately what it's all about, right? When you think about creating more efficiencies, when you think about creating more capacity, it's all about being able to have the space that CPA firm professionals often feel like they're lacking to better service their clients, to add more value in the services that they're delivering. So there are multiple ways that really just changing that mindset can help to achieve goals and stay on target.
Well, I think it's really important because it is possible, and you've probably seen this, Ariana. It is possible for a firm to put in a lot of time and money and energy into making their processes and name the process, whichever one it is, to be more efficient. Yet they end up still not having a competitive advantage in the marketplace, still not being able, maybe still not having the right skills on their team to deliver higher value services, and things of that sort. So I really like what you're saying because it takes both in order to, experience that success. So you mentioned some of those solutions, one of which was actually getting people to think about and maybe even workshop together, whiteboard together, or at least discuss what are we going to do if we were maybe a year from, kind of a year from today, talking about the fact that we have all this increased capacity, where are we going to put our energy to help grow our firm and serve our clients? Any specific solutions you have, or maybe sessions you've been a part of how firms can do that?
Well, one angle that I thought was really interesting when I was working with a firm and we were answering the questions of what would you do with the capacity, what metrics are we actually going to track? So it's important to identify and then track KPIs or key performance indicators for process improvement in order to measure your levels of success. And one of the KPIs that this firm was really committed to as we were having our conversations was the percent of hours spent by level, which ended up being a really interesting conversation when it comes to the results of efficiencies and capacity. Because if we can look at making sure that everyone is working at their best and highest use, which gets back to the talent piece of things, because process doesn't just exist in a silo. And if we can actually move the needle, because what they were seeing was that the work just wasn't getting done at the right level. They had an opportunity to really leverage work to other levels and to also leverage their technology better. So now one of their commitments is to track that metric, but it just doesn't stop there with tracking that metric. It becomes they have goals for what they're going to do once those metrics and as those metrics continue to train. So thinking about the role of the partner group. So what would you do if your partners were spending less time on the compliance work, less hours spent by level on that compliance work? What would your partners be doing instead? So now the partners have business development goals. What would you do if your managers were spending less time, on their current projects? We're still getting the same amount of work done. We're doing the same amount of work with our resources and getting that work done, but then their managers can focus on training and development of staff. So it's really asking that question of what would we do with that additional time? They already have their plan. That really motivates everyone to work towards those goals. So that's one example of, you would think that it's just starting off as an efficiency project, but it's so much bigger than that.
Right. So, you mentioned one firm example there, but I know you've worked with dozens and dozens and dozens of firms over the years on this. So you pretty much have seen it all. But share some examples of, some firms that you've worked with that have really, kind of grasped this concept of we are focused on how to leverage the capacity and really looking to move towards something versus just moving away from something. What are some of the results you see firms having?
So it starts off with building um, the capacity through, as I mentioned earlier, the time, the money, the resources. So thinking about things like increase in revenue and FTE, decrease in total hours, decrease in write-offs, decrease in turnover, thinking about increase in client satisfaction, and taking all of those things and putting them together to apply them to new strategies. So looking at how they can apply process improvement across the organization and break down silos between departments. Looking at how they can develop new service lines for their clients where they are truly moving to being more consultative in what they're doing because they now have the capacity and space to be able to do that. I worked with one firm that was actually working to develop a future focused angle of one of their key departments so that they could take time to now start to plot and chart out what the future actually looks like instead of being kind of all consumed by the ongoings of today. So it really, and one of the biggest things that we see is firms that are then taking their goals from their strategic plan. And if you don't have a strategic plan, you definitely should, one that is documented and shared within your firm. But they're taking those process improvement, they're taking their strategic plan and using process improvement to create the space to then achieve those goals. So in some cases that may vary a little bit firm by firm, but to be able to have the space and the freedom to now focus on those things and to create and increase the buy-in and accountability to work on those things together as a firm, it's really interesting to watch how process improvement can help open the doors and facilitate those opportunities.
That's great. I know you spend a lot of time, obviously within the accounting profession, and this topic is extremely relevant to our profession, today. What are you seeing outside of the accounting profession in terms of, and maybe actually I shouldn't say accounting profession, Ariana. Maybe I should say accounting firms. What are you seeing outside of accounting firms that are kind of key influences on maybe what is happening in firms today related to this?
I'd say one of the biggest areas that are influencing this are the solution providers to the profession. So technology plays such a large piece in this when it comes to increasing efficiency and consistency, creating quality, really looking, a lot of that goes back to automation and better integrating process and technology. And the solutions that the key technology providers within the profession are creating and continuing to improve are really making a huge impact. And again, that gets back to the importance of focusing on process because technology and process go hand in hand. We can't have old processes and new technology. We want to make sure that those are really in step. So I'd say that is really creating there's really continuing to be that convergence. And I think we've especially seen that accelerated over the past year or so where the way that technology is advancing is allowing firms to be more successful with creating that capacity to focus on the things that matter.
Right. And I'm so glad you said that because this is, if there are any technology solutions, anyone working in a technology solution or running one of those companies, pay attention to what Ariana is saying here because it's important that I think the key vendors in our profession understand that this is the direction things are going. And if you are just focused on increasing efficiency for efficiency's sake without that larger end goal or that focus about what to do with the capacity, then you're probably not going to be able to help your clients as well as you should be. So I think that's a really good point, Ariana. So let's say we have someone listening, to this podcast right now, and they really like what you're saying, and they just want to take kind of the first next step, right? The next first step toward kind of moving beyond efficiency to leveraging their capacity. What's your recommendation, Ariana?
Well, I think it all starts with the strategic plan, as I mentioned earlier, having a plan for the goals and direction and vision as a firm is essential. But from there, I would recommend that people just ask the question, what would I do if I had increased efficiency or capacities in capacity? You could define that, as I've said, as time, money, resources. What would we do with that would help us really meet our strategic goals and our strategic plan? And then from there, it's really helpful to then identify what processes will help to support that move in that direction. So start with your strategic plan. Give some thought to what you would do. That's changing your mindset on what you would do if you had increased efficiencies and capacity. What would you do with that? And then start evaluating what processes would help to support, what process improvement initiatives would help support movement in that direction. Remembering that process doesn't exist in a silo. It definitely takes considerations across your talent, your technology, needs to be happening at a leadership level as well, and that it all ultimately will lead to the growth of your firm.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Arianna. I like how you just really kind of ended that with being very concise about the next steps. So I think that is really digestible there. And so it all starts with that strategic plan. So that's great. So I know you're constantly putting out content on social media and in through some of the industry publications, but as it pertains to social media, Arianna, where can our listeners find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Arianna_BCI. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Arianna Campbell. You can find me there. And would love to connect with you and also, take advantage of the resources I share, not only from content that I've created, but also content from other consultants with at Boomer Consulting and within the profession. So always happy to connect with people and share.
Awesome, Arianna. Well, as always, it's a pleasure talking with you. So thank you for being on our Boomer Briefing podcast for this episode. And for those listeners out there, just a reminder, we release a new episode every Tuesday morning. So if you like this episode and want to hear more, feel free to check out past episodes, but know that there is another new episode coming out the next Tuesday morning. Thank you so much. Thanks, Arianna.